Chapter 28 The Book Thief. He is really very envious of his previous life when reading, once fantasized about the red sleeve night reading scene, so earlier we'll see hard pull, accompanied him to write half a day, sniffing the indoor burning incense, the body fragrance of the daughter's body, the tip of the pen's soft hair and the paper lightly touching the slippery, and enjoying that kind of exceptionally peaceful and wonderful feeling. However, he thought that if he wrote a book, it would bring a lot of unnecessary trouble to him, so he decided to write quietly by himself. Fan Xian always felt that he had to prepare himself in advance for his future life in Kyoto, materially as well as spiritually. And since it was impossible for a long, beautiful text like Dream of the Red Chamber to be copied from a poem and blurted out at a banquet, he had to prepare himself in advance. I do not know why, he always felt that his future life, certainly with the center of the country of Qing, the distant Kyoto, cannot be associated, perhaps the high court official's biological father, perhaps the impression of the yellow-haired girl, perhaps he has not seen a side, but always a certain name of the curious mother. He thought for a moment, and again put pen to paper to finish writing those unspeakable things between Baoyu and Qing Zhonga this time around, and when the ink was dry, he put it into an envelope and prepared to send it to Fan Ruarua, who was far away in Kyoto. In his residence in Tanyu Port, Fan Xian did not keep any drafts, but wrote and sent one to Kyoto. Because it was really hard for him to suppress in his heart that he wanted to share the beautiful experience of his past life with the people of this world, just like a certain person who possessed the most beautiful jade in the world that no one had ever seen, and who had hidden it under his bed for many years, would be itching to death in his heart, and would always be eager to let the whole world know. There should be at least one person who would be able to share it with the people of this world. No, there should be at least one person who would be able to share it with the people of this world. Should be at least one person, know this jade stone heart-stopping beauty. The collector who would collect a famous painting for the rest of his life without showing it to anyone, if not a pervert, would be the thief who stole this painting. And Fan Xian knew that he was certainly not a pervert, and although he was indeed a thief, it was wonderful that no one in this world knew. So Fan Xian completely ignored Fan Ruarua girl's age, and has been sending her the manuscript on a monthly basis, and then telling her that the story is called The Book of Stones, written by a man called Chao Shua Chen, and that he happened to be acquainted with it by chance, and that he gets some manuscripts from him every month, and shares them with his sister, and how it's cloudy. Although the first 15 chapters of The Dream of the Red Mansion, there are still Qing Dream Will Baoyu First Try Cloud and Rain Love and other passages, but Fan Xianli sure that the little girl in their own so many years of letters under the cultivation, it should not be regarded as a flood of beasts, and will not be their own brother to see this as a person of what lecherous evil. As expected, Fan Ruoro got Chao Gong's text, ignorant reading, as if the peony chewing, but also slowly tasted some flavor, especially after seeing Dayu into the house. It began to feel good. Every month will come to the letter to urge his brother to ask more to that Chao Gong war. When Fan Xian received the letter, his heart could not help but feel bitter, thinking that this deposit is gone. The update naturally cannot be too fast, and when he copied to 70 or 80 chapters in the future, he will always fall into a eunuch's fate. After finishing his work as a copyist, Fan Xian began to read books as he did on a normal day. There were many miscellaneous books in his study, all of which had been sent over from the Earl's house in Kyoto, and whenever he thought about this matter, his heart's impression of the father he had never met would always change. At least the other party still knew what were the most important things that were most pressing in one's growth process. In a country with no AV and no pits, Fan Xian's way to get rid of his boredom, besides playing hide-and-seek with the domineering true qi in his body every day and making his maids blush, was to read these miscellaneous books in his study. The content of the books is extremely broad. From farming to the laws of Qing dynasty, everything is included. There are also some of this world's scriptures are like bricks stuffed with a whole layer of bookcases. This bookcase is Fan Xian in accordance with his own mind style. Style is very simple, each layer inside the yaozhou produced in the grass. This grass can prevent the most moth-eaten books, just this world seems to be not many people know, so in the house just as a general spice in use. After reading the books for these years, Fan Xian found many shadows of what he had learned in his previous life from those scriptures, only some slight differences in the way of expression, and this realization made him stop copying Han Fei Zi, Sun Zi, Lao Zi, Sun Zi, and several Zi, so as to become a generation of academic ideas. Regardless of which aspect of study he was doing, including drug knowledge, cultivation, and reading, Fan Xian was very serious, accumulating knowledge with a composure and assiduousness that was not at all in keeping with his age. Because he understands that he is not much more than the next person, he did not come to a perfect world where the average IQ is 50. The advantage he can have is just a little bit of knowledge precipitated by the Earth Society. And there is also the initial moment of awakening, which is much earlier than that of the general children's enlightenment. The oil lamp, a light sound, popped out a small group of light flower, suddenly became a little brighter. Fan Xian ambushed reading, gradually fall asleep. The next morning woke up, washed up. Fan Xian first went to the old lady's bedroom to ask for peace, before going to the hall for breakfast. Ever since the assassin's incident, the way Fan Xian looked at his grandmother again was very different from before, and in addition to sticking to the morning and afternoon greetings for many years, he would also chat with his kind-looking grandmother from time to time about some family matters and tell a few little jokes to amuse the old man. I heard that one day, His Majesty the Emperor summoned the Chancellor, the Consular Ministers of the Senate, the President of the Supervisory Academy, the head eunuchs of the palace, and a group of high-ranking officials to discuss the state of the nation in the Great Hall. As a result, a meteorite flew down from the sky that day, smashing through the roof of the hall and hitting all the ministers who were kneeling below. His Majesty hurriedly summoned the eunuch to come and treat them, and waited outside the ward. In a short while, the doctor came out. His Majesty was busy asking, "Doctor, is the Prime Minister still alive?" The imperial doctor shook his head very woodenly. "The Chancellor is hopeless." In front of the paragraph, the old lady was full of lonely doubts, not knowing why the little child spoke about the things in Kyoto, these insidious things in power. The old lady did not know how much she had personally experienced, so she was always careful. His Majesty asked again, "What about the consular minister?" The eunuch shook his head again in frustration. "Alas, it is also hopeless." His Majesty asked again, "Hom Gom Gom?" The eunuch still shook his head. His Majesty was furious, reprimanded, "Then in the end who is still saved?" The eunuch's spirit was revitalized and said, "Your Majesty is blessed, Qingguo is saved." Hearing the last sentence, the old lady instantly woke up, trembling with laughter, tears in her eyes, nearly laughing, pointing at Fan Xian's innocent face and cursing with a laugh, "You little procrastinator, if it was in Kyoto, you'd have to be arrested by the procuratorate based on this joke alone."